Hello, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in healthcare IT. And today's guest is Sean Duffy. He's co-founder and CEO at Omada Health. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me, John.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you. I've heard so much about Omada. I've seen you on stage a few times, and I'm excited to finally have you on the show. But for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and Omada Health.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everybody. So, I'm Sean Duffy, co-founder and CEO of Omada Health. Quick journey for me. Worked in technology for a number of years. Went to medical school and founded Omada while in med school, which kind of speaks to what we do. Just recognize that there needed to be a company that really merged the best in class of design and technology with really the hard road of what it takes to commercialize and earn credibility in enterprise healthcare. So that led to Omada. And the best way to think of us is as a provider that focuses on clinical services and disease areas that really complement primary care. So we support in pre-diabetes, diabetes, hypertension, some capabilities in behavioral health, made an acquisition in musculoskeletal care. And the vision is that there are just these certain diseases where a digital virtual first approach is the right approach to optimize for value and outcomes. And that's where we're going to play.
Well, and I think that's what makes this discussion so interesting is your digital first approach, right? And, you've had a lot of experience with virtual care. Where are we at today with that? And what do you kind of see as coming next?
Well, we've gone on a fun journey. Mine may have been like a couple years early.
Mhm.
My gosh, I remember 5 years ago, we'd go to, health plans, to providers and share, look, we're a provider, and which is true. We contract as a covered entity, like all of our revenues are claims based. I mean, we're now NCQA accredited.
Okay.
But they'd kind of scratch their heads and be like, okay, so you're a provider. Where are your offices? And you'd be like, well, I'll hear you. So you can deliver care in some areas without needing to like be in person with somebody. So that's gone. That does not happen anymore. And I think that was heading that direction anyway. COVID served as an accelerant to that trajectory. But that's done. But that being said, I still feel we're early innings in what virtual care needs to be, because what happened was actually quite suboptimal. We had to literally, over the span of a couple of weeks, pivot operations and practices in the U.S. healthcare system to try out care from afar. Some of it worked, a lot of it didn't. And so the next chapter here is really, deciphering, well, all right, and thinking proactively, well, what would the future healthcare system look like? What should it look like if you're designing it optimally with intentionality? So it's a neat moment because there's recognition that this has to happen, but it's time to lay some of the proper foundations of what it should look like in an optimal setting.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, what a mindset shift, right? That you don't even have that discussion now. We know there's options.
Oh, yeah.
But there is a retrenchment of kind of the current provider. I have a practice, come back to the office. Like, how is that going to play out for Omada Health? Like, are you going to help support them with these technologies? Are you going to compete with them? How do you see that really playing out?
We view ourselves as extremely complementary to existing, in-person care. And the way that I tend to articulate it is think of us as an adjunct to a primary care, office or a primary care physician. And, in yesterday's world, which is still mostly today's world, you as a primary care doc would have the care for diabetes on your shoulder. And you would know, because my friends are now practicing PCPs. I talked to them a lot about this. You would know that the tools that you have, the way that you're reimbursed, and the visit infrastructure that you have is not going to get your patients to the right outcomes. So, you can partner with a company like Omada, where we really serve as a care partner just in that focused area longitudinally to support your patients toward better outcomes in ways that you're not reimbursed to do, you don't have the time to do. And frankly, we as a country are up against an extraordinary healthcare practitioner shortage.
Yeah.
There weren't enough PCPs in the country for us pre-pandemic. And now we're seeing just massive attrition, across the U.S. healthcare industry. So I think what I would say to providers is to really think, well, operations probably need to change. And what are the things that allow your capabilities to shine brightest for you, your brand, and your patients?
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of all the doctors that wish they could do more for their diabetic patients, right? But
Oh, totally.
as you say, it
Yep.
doesn't fit into the 15-minute reimbursement cycle that we've created.
Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've created quite a focus. You kind of mentioned it in your intro around MSK or
Mhm.
musculoskeletal, which I'm proud I said that properly.
It's a mouthful.
Such a
Yep.
hard word for me. But as you mentioned, you had the acquisition of Physera, and what's really your approach with that, and what have you accomplished in the musculoskeletal space?
Yeah, absolutely. So relative to MSK, it fit perfectly into our rubric of care areas we're open to considering, which
Mhm.
is, one, clinical feasibility.
Okay.
Omada's not going to be doing hip surgeries anytime soon. So you need to
Mhm.
really not get caught up in any hype or exuberance of like the power of digital without thinking first principles, like actually what can be done for care. And if you study musculoskeletal care, what you quickly realize is a significant portion of physical therapy and intervention can actually be done from afar more conveniently. You might think, well, my gosh, you need all these huge machines. That is true in select instances, but for the vast majority of needs, you as a physical therapist can help support someone doing physical therapy in their home quite effectively. So within that rubric, Omada was interested in this space. We kept hearing from our customers, which are self-insured employers. So we now work with just about 1,800 self-insured employers across the U.S.
Wow.
And they kept telling us, hey, my gosh, our musculoskeletal costs are going up and up and up. We know that our employees need better care paths, but their experience right now is booking a PT visit 3 months out and maybe going once, but realizing that going that next week interferes with their daily life.
Hmm.
So they go into radiology quicker, they might get surgery quicker, they might be on medications quicker, where physical therapy can be a very therapeutic intervention. So we got excited about the space and found an incredible company named Physera. Now the branding is Omada for musculoskeletal care, and they had a similar vision as Omada in that you need both technology and licensed practitioners
Mhm.
blended together to produce quality and outcomes. And acquired the company and integrated it into our overall kind of platform and capability set.
So what is the blend there, right? I think many people look at it like, oh, so PTs are dead, right? like
Okay,
you're not going to go to the PT, but I mean,
yeah.
how do you blend, and when do you need the human versus the technology?
So yeah, the way that I always view it, and this is true across condition lines, is it is really a requirement for the evolution of our healthcare system um, to get the maximal value out of any credential.
Mhm.
And that everybody wins in that world, because what that means is your practitioners are really have comfort and they're doing the things that are like at the tip of their licensure. It's like why they went into care
Mhm.
versus the mundane stuff where they know in the back of their mind, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm being paid this much to do that. So with MSK, it's really neat. I mean, you get a very quick visit with a PT. There's no like waiting weeks to get scheduled. It's on
Mhm.
your time. You start with a video consult. Licensed PT. We operate in all 50 states. They make an assessment. Ideally, they can make a diagnosis.
Mhm.
There's an animated library of about 500 interactive exercises that they, relative to your pathology, create for you. So they create a care plan with our library of therapeutic exercises. And then they, of course, can do more synchronous, visits if needed. But there's this neat way to create asynchronous accountability. So you'll have the care plan. We'll monitor, and the PTs will monitor like how you're doing against it if you're doing it.
Mhm.
There'll be little moments where we'll ask you to like check in on form, and we send you a little phone stand. You'll put your phone up. It'll create a recording of your form that'll go asynchronous to the PT.
Wow.
We've launched computer vision where let's say you have a shoulder injury, where you'll do functional tests, and it'll automatically monitor the progress of angle,
Uh-huh.
and the PTs will review it in background. So it's this neat blend of uh, actual people that are incredible professionals having a better toolkit, using their time in a more optimized way. So,
Wow.
it's funny. I never, we love technology just as much as anybody, but the idea that, artificial intelligence is taking the humans out of healthcare is pretty silly once you start talking to, patients and members.
Well, and that's what I've always said is that artificial intelligence should take away the mundane that
Exactly.
humans don't want to do. And
Mhm.
ironically, I actually wrote an article for Solution Reach recently on
Okay.
just this topic, talking
Uh-huh.
about that's actually how you retain the best
Yeah.
people, because the best people don't want to do the mundane.
Oh, for sure. No, it feels horrible to do that. It feels horrible to do that.
Yeah,
So yeah, you're
absolutely.
spot on. And it's I mean, along those lines, there's always a quip I use, externally, which is like, look, there's a reason that artificial intelligence is a buzzword, but artificial empathy is not.
Mm,
And in an ideal world, actually, digital care feels more human. You're like,
yeah.
wait a second, for the first time, this person is like actually getting to know like me on my terms.
Mhm.
Right now, a lot of care feels like, hey, John, you come in. You call for something mundane. It's like, go ahead and book a visit. Find childcare, take time off your work, drive into my setting. I'm probably going to be late, wait in my waiting room, and then I'll bless you with 15 minutes. So
Yeah.
that's not the fault of providers. It's just the constraints of the system.
Yeah. So I saw you all talk about like virtual first care, which I think is a great twist of buzzwords as a marketing guy myself. But obviously we had mobile first from the tech industry, right? And so it's a great takeoff
Mm-hmm.
of that, right?
Yeah.
Which is mobile first versus website, right? Instagram was the best example of that, right? So virtual first care is a really fascinating concept, but how do you really see this playing out for patients? I mean, we've talked about a number of virtual options, but
Mm-hmm.
virtual first, is that really happening, or what will it take to have it happen?
So it's a mental model. And inside the walls of Omada, we used to call it in person as option B. There's kind of a piece, a perspective we put out, on that, uh,
Uh-huh.
it, you know, far before COVID. And the thesis was that, um, why wouldn't you try to solve someone's needs effectively and safely from afar, conveniently,
Mm.
without saying reactionally, reactively, you should come in.
By the way, I
And
think the answer to that question is that providers didn't need to. They were paid enough to force you to come in.
precisely, yeah, and
Sadly.
no, in the shackles of the current, billing and regulatory infrastructure in many ways made that tough.
Mhm.
So, um, virtual first is a statement to say that every year you should be asking yourself, how do you deliver more care services more conveniently and effectively from afar?
Mhm.
And then, bit by bit, you'll kind of find the thresholds and the bounds, and that'll push more and more care utilization, into the pocket, into the home, into the cloud. And I think that that's an effective thing for the country, and because it, improves access, improves experience. So it's a little bit of a mindset shift. My observations when I founded the company is like, I'd be, with these C-level execs at providers or otherwise, and digital was kind of an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, we can imagine someday we'll like send our patients out the door with an app.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, that's not a winning strategy in today's world. One needs to think through how you first optimize for virtual and then fold it in person as needed, not the other way around. Which is what virtual first, communicates, and that's how Omada's operated from day one because of the care areas we serve. I mean, we're able to do that.
Yeah. And to your point of the shortage of professionals, we kind of have to do this in order
Oh,
to
oh, oh, we
manage
have
the
to.
future.
Oh my gosh, like you have to spend 30 seconds with anyone responsible for recruiting at any provider in the country, and you'll just like you recognize that the solution isn't, even if we had the bodies to put at it, that wouldn't be the right answer, but we don't.
Right.
So, this is a time to just face that reality and recognize that there has to be a different way of delivering care. And exactly per your point, everybody wins because you're going to attract the best people if you're using their skill sets optimally and they're not doing the mundane work that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. So you're hosting a conference virtually called Mindset, and excuse the pun, but what's the mindset for
That's
this
awesome.
conference, right?
Well, it's yeah. So we at Omada, we have an industry conference called Mindset, and we picked that term as the name for the conference deliberately because it hits on a lot of what we do.
Okay.
The first mindset shift that needed to happen was people realizing that care actually could be delivered from afar.
Yeah.
And all of what we just talked about, are all examples of mindset shifts. So it's open to all comers, anyone interested in, joining, contributing in some dialogue, and, with leaders from healthcare, technology, data science, you name it. And the theme is really against where we're at in time, which is, knock on wood, it's always, I think we've all been once bitten, twice shy on imagining what's going to happen with COVID, but knock on wood, we're going to find ourselves in a world where, ideally the pandemic gets closer to the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And what's going to be required is a thoughtful analysis, now that we're, especially in the provider setting, not on our heels, a thoughtful analysis of like, all right, what did we learn that we want to keep? What did we learn that we want to scrap? And those two questions need to be asked in a way that's measured, reflective, that has a breath between them, versus operating in the context of crisis, which we've done as a community over the last 2 years. So that's going to be the focus of a lot of the conference.
Yeah. It is such a big mindset shift. And, I've often argued that, and I kind of mentioned it slightly previously, that, a lot of the reason it hasn't changed is so many people are profiting from the dysfunction and from the legacy mindset, if you will. And, it's hard to change that, right? So will you be talking about some of those and even reimbursement models and things like that as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. We will, and I'm working on kind of a piece that touches on that as well. It's that will be touched on in the conference too.
Yeah. Cool. So how do you see the confluence of all this happening? I mean, there's money pouring in crazy ways that I don't quite fully understand yet. I don't think anyone, like, how is this going to really play out, right? But around virtual care, around digital therapeutics, right? Telehealth, remote patient monitoring, of course, AI, everything of all that data, which is probably essential to scale up all of these solutions. How do you see that playing out? What's the market for this look like in, say, 10 years from now? Who are going to be those players?
Yeah, I mean, on balance, it's a huge net positive to have so much capital going to the space. It's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'll see over the course of the next couple of years, like, probably more skepticism and like, whoa, did we go beyond our skis here?
And some probably did, right? If you raise 100 million, you got to go for $1 billion exit, and that might not happen.
Yeah, it might not happen, which is okay. I mean, that's the journey innovation takes. So,
Right.
One wants a lot of different care approaches to be tried, relative to the frank reality that we can't grow the healthcare piece of our GDP any further. I mean, it's like and there's no reason. I mean, at the spend we have, we should be able to get more and more value out of that every single year and have just the world's best healthcare outcomes. So you want thousands of innovators trying to make that happen. And with that is going to come huge successes and huge failures. So that on balance is great. And I think the other thing that, it's happening relative to your question is, it forces folks that could be in a position to rest on their laurels to not. Because imagine if you're just, an entity that's large, doesn't matter what space, provider, plan, you're now seeing a lot of changes happening, and you're going to have to ask yourself, well, holy crap, is what Omada's doing complementary, competitive? Like, how do we think about that? And the fact that at boardrooms and executive meetings, that's going to be discussed because of all this infusion of innovation and capital. Different actions will be taken and different innovations will be tried, and all that is a great thing for the space. So it's when people always ask me, like, what do you think of like Amazon or Apple or Google? It's great. Like, even if nothing comes of it, it's amazing. Like, let everybody, Omada, any current ecosystem feel a sense of pressure to out innovate and outperform for your key stakeholders. And that's on balance very positive.
Yeah. I have no problem with them mentoring. My question is always, will these large companies profit from this dysfunction of healthcare, or will they do innovations that actually improve the system, right? And so I think that's the interesting question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, and I think that's true for any company, right? And that's the challenge. What's amazing though, is that there's so many in healthcare that want to do the right thing that, I think that's a power that, I see a lot from a lot of organizations.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there the changing ways in which you deliver care, like open up some reimbursement billing flexibility. And I mean, Omada, I mean, we've never from day one built fee for service. It's always been on this like different
Yeah.
sort of fee structure that gives us like freedom on how we render our care. So, it's like and we were just able to do that because we started from scratch. So we didn't have to like fit into the existing structures.
Yeah. I saw this amazing conference. They had three panelists. One was value-based care driven, and the other two are fee for service. And they'd ask a question. The fee for service would answer. The fee for service would answer. The value-based care. That's not a problem for us. We're value-based care. And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
that's basically his answer to everything. You're like, oh, it does really solve all of those things that annoy us about healthcare. So that's powerful.
Yeah. It has to cascade down to operations. Like the next chapter is like you can get under a full cap value-based contract as a provider, but all your operations were just tailor-made in the context of delivering care in a fee for service setting. It's very tough to change those on a dime. So billing models alone won't solve it. It's the combination of billing and different practices. So
absolutely. Well, Sean, this was a lot of fun. I love hearing your perspectives, hearing what Omada Health's doing, and a little preview of the future, I think, of, working virtual first. I think as patients, we all want this, and we just need the health system to get behind us. So thanks so much for sharing, and thanks everyone for watching. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or on your favorite podcasting application. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, Sean.
Thank you, John.